The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Sarah Martinez adjusted her tactical gear one final time. At 28, she had already broken more barriers than most people encountered in a lifetime. The first Latina to graduate top of her class from the Marine Corps combat training, the youngest woman ever selected for force reconnaissance, and, now, the first female candidate to attempt the Navy SEAL Hell Week evaluation program. Sarah's journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she had watched her single mother work 3 jobs just to keep their small apartment. Violence was a daily reality in their neighborhood, and Sarah learned early that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about mental fortitude, strategic thinking, and the unwavering belief that you could overcome any obstacle placed in your way. Her mother, Elena, had immigrated from Mexico with nothing but dreams and determination. Despite the language barriers and countless rejections, Elena built a small but successful cleaning business. She taught Sarah that respect was earned through actions, not given because of gender or background. These lessons would prove invaluable in the years to come. The Marine Corps had been Sarah's escape route from a life of limited possibilities. She enlisted at 18, immediately distinguishing herself in boot camp. Her drill instructors initially tried to break her spirit with extra physical challenges and verbal intimidation, assuming she would crumble under pressure like several female recruits before her. Instead, Sarah thrived on the adversity. She completed every obstacle course faster than required, exceeded every fitness standard, and maintained perfect discipline even when pushed to her absolute limits. Her reputation grew during her first deployment to Afghanistan. While serving as a communications specialist, her forward operating base came under heavy Taliban attack. When an IED explosion knocked out their main radio equipment and wounded several Marines, Sarah single-handedly established communication with headquarters while providing suppressing fire against enemy positions. Her quick thinking and calm under fire saved 17 lives that day and earned her a Bronze Star with Valor. But Sarah knew she was capable of more. The Marines had given her excellent training, but she craved the ultimate challenge. When the Department of Defense announced a pilot program allowing qualified women to attempt SEAL training, Sarah was among the first to volunteer. The selection process was brutal. Months of psychological evaluations, advanced physical testing, and intensive background checks. Out of over 200 female applicants, only 12 were selected for the program. Sarah was the youngest. Now, standing on the beach where countless Navy SEALs had earned their tridents, Sarah felt the weight of history and expectation. The 301 Navy SEALs gathered for this unprecedented event represented some of the most elite warriors in the world. Many had deployed multiple times to the most dangerous places on Earth. Some had been skeptical about women joining their ranks, while others remained cautiously optimistic. All of them would be watching every move she made over the next week. The Hell Week evaluation wasn't officially part of SEAL training. It was designed as a comprehensive assessment to determine if women could meet the physical and mental demands of the program. Sarah and the 11 other female candidates would face modified versions of the most challenging SEAL training exercises, compressed into 5 intense days. The Navy brass wanted data, and every SEAL instructor wanted to see what these women were truly made of. Master Chief Petty Officer James Brick Patterson had been selected to oversee the evaluation. A 23-year veteran with deployments across 4 different theaters of war, Patterson had trained hundreds of SEALs. He was known for his fairness, but also his unwillingness to compromise standards. If women were going to join the SEAL teams, they would have to prove they belonged there. Patterson studied Sarah's file as she approached the starting line. Her physical scores were impressive. She could run a 6-minute mile, complete 50 pull-ups without stopping, and swim 2 miles in rough ocean conditions. But physical ability was only part of the equation. The SEAL community valued mental toughness above all else, and that couldn't be measured on paper. The first exercise was a team-building challenge that required all 12 women to work together to move a 400-pound log across a series of obstacles. Sarah immediately noticed the dynamics within the group. Some candidates tried to take charge without understanding the task, while others hesitated to contribute ideas. Sarah listened carefully, assessed the situation, and then offered a strategic approach that utilized each woman's strengths. "Martinez, take point," said Lieutenant Sarah Chun, a former Navy pilot who seemed to emerge as an informal leader. "You've got the best tactical awareness." Sarah nodded and moved to the front of the log. She had studied the obstacle course the night before, noting that brute force alone wouldn't overcome the challenges ahead. The course included climbing walls, crawling sections, and water crossings that required precise coordination and timing. As they lifted the log and began moving forward, Sarah called out instructions while monitoring the team's energy levels. She noticed that two of the women were struggling with the weight and quietly redistributed the load without making them feel inadequate. When they reached the first major obstacle, a 12-foot wall, Sarah devised a human pyramid system that allowed them to hoist the log over while ensuring everyone made it safely to the other side. The watching SEALs began to take notice. This wasn't just about individual performance. Sarah was demonstrating leadership qualities that many of them recognized from their own training and combat experience. She wasn't trying to prove she was the strongest or fastest. She was proving she could make the entire team more effective. The second day brought water-based challenges. Sarah had always been an exceptional swimmer, but the exercises were designed to simulate combat conditions in hostile environments. The candidates had to navigate underwater obstacle courses while wearing full gear, conduct mock beach landings under simulated enemy fire, and complete precision diving tasks that required both physical skill and mental calculation. During the underwater navigation exercise, one of the candidates, Rebecca Torres, a former Army Ranger, became disoriented and began to panic 50 feet below the surface. Sarah immediately noticed Torres wasn't following the designated route and made a split-second decision to deviate from her own course. Swimming against a strong current, she reached Torres just as the woman was about to surface prematurely, which would have resulted in automatic disqualification. Using hand signals, Sarah guided Torres through a breathing technique she had learned during her Marine Corps training. Together, they completed the underwater course within the time limit. Torres would later say that Sarah's intervention not only saved her place in the program, but possibly her life. Master Chief Patterson watched this interaction with growing interest. In the SEAL community, the willingness to risk personal success for a teammate's welfare was considered one of the highest virtues. Sarah had demonstrated this principle without hesitation, even though helping Torres could have compromised her own performance. The third day focused on combat simulations and weapons proficiency. Sarah's Marine Corps experience became evident as she navigated urban warfare scenarios with precision and confidence. She had spent years training with various weapon systems and understood tactical movement in ways that some of her fellow candidates did not. During one particularly challenging scenario, the women were divided into 3 teams and tasked with capturing a fortified position defended by SEAL instructors using non-lethal simulation rounds. Sarah found herself leading a 4-woman team against overwhelming odds. The defending SEALs had superior positioning, better equipment, and years of experience. Rather than attempt a frontal assault that would certainly fail, Sarah studied the terrain and identified a weakness in the defender's setup. She noticed that their position, while strong against direct attacks, was vulnerable to a coordinated approach from multiple angles. Sarah split her team into pairs and used a complex flanking maneuver that required precise timing and communication. The first pair would create a diversion on the eastern approach, drawing the defender's attention and fire. Meanwhile, Sarah and her partner would circle around to the north, using natural cover to approach undetected. The key was timing. The diversion had to be convincing enough to commit the defenders, but not so aggressive that her teammates would be overwhelmed. Sarah's plan worked flawlessly. Her team successfully captured the objective in record time, surprising even the SEAL instructors who had designed the exercise. After the simulation, one of the defending SEALs approached her. "Where did you learn that flanking technique?" asked Chief Petty Officer Mike Rodriguez, a veteran of multiple combat deployments. "Afghanistan," Sarah replied simply. "Sometimes being smaller and faster is better than being bigger and stronger." Rodriguez nodded with apparent respect. He had served alongside Marines in combat and understood that experience in actual warfare was invaluable. Sarah wasn't just demonstrating textbook knowledge. She was applying lessons learned under real enemy fire. By the fourth day, word about Sarah's performance had spread throughout the SEAL community. Officers who weren't directly involved in the evaluation began stopping by to observe. Sarah remained focused on the tasks at hand, but she could feel the weight of scrutiny increasing. The day's challenges included advanced navigation exercises using only basic equipment, survival scenarios that tested resourcefulness and adaptability, and psychological stress tests designed to break mental resilience. Sarah approached each challenge methodically, drawing on her diverse experiences and training. During the survival exercise, candidates were given minimal supplies and tasked with finding food, creating shelter, and maintaining warmth in harsh conditions. Sarah's childhood in East Los Angeles, where she had often gone without adequate food or heating, proved unexpectedly valuable. She knew how to make much from little, how to find nutrition in unexpected places, and how to stay warm using improvised techniques. While other candidates struggled with the unfamiliar conditions, Sarah efficiently constructed a shelter using available materials and found edible plants that most people would overlook. She also helped several teammates who were struggling, sharing her knowledge without being asked. The psychological testing proved equally challenging. Candidates were subjected to intense interrogation techniques, sleep deprivation, and scenarios designed to create maximum stress and confusion. Sarah's mental preparation served her well. She had spent years developing meditation techniques and stress management strategies that allowed her to maintain clarity even under extreme pressure. One exercise required her to solve complex mathematical problems while instructors shouted contradictory information and used various distraction techniques. Sarah simply closed her eyes, controlled her breathing, and worked through each problem systematically. Her accuracy rate was higher than many SEAL candidates typically achieved. As the fourth day concluded, Master Chief Patterson reviewed the evaluation data with growing amazement. Sarah's scores were consistently in the top percentile across all categories. More importantly, her leadership qualities and team-oriented mindset were exactly what the SEAL community valued most highly. However, Patterson knew that the real test was yet to come. The fifth and final day would present the ultimate challenge, one designed to push every candidate beyond their perceived limits and determine who truly had the mental fortitude to join the most elite military unit in the world. That evening, as Sarah performed maintenance on her equipment and prepared mentally for the final day, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about her mother's sacrifices, the Marines who had believed in her potential, and the women who would follow in her footsteps if she succeeded. She also thought about the SEALs who were watching and evaluating her performance. She understood that some remained skeptical about women joining their community, and she respected their concerns. The bonds forged in SEAL training and combat were unlike anything in civilian life, and any change to that dynamic needed to be carefully considered. But Sarah also believed that diversity of thought and experience could strengthen any team. Her different perspective and background hadn't weakened her Marine units. They had made them more adaptable and effective. She hoped to prove the same principle could apply to the SEAL community. As the sun set over Coronado Beach, Sarah prepared for what she knew would be the most challenging day of her life. She had no way of knowing that the events of the next 18 hours would not only determine her own future, but would also become a defining moment in military history, one that would be studied and discussed for decades to come. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything Sarah had learned about courage, leadership, and the true meaning of strength. Tomorrow, 301 Navy SEALs would witness something that would change their understanding of what it meant to be an elite warrior. The alarm sounded at 0400 hours, piercing through the pre-dawn darkness like a knife. Sarah's eyes snapped open immediately, a skill developed through years of military service where the difference between alertness and confusion could mean life or death. Around her, the other female candidates stirred with varying degrees of readiness. Some had clearly been awake for hours, consumed by nervous energy, while others struggled to shake off the exhaustion accumulated over 4 brutal days of testing. Sarah rolled out of her bunk with practiced efficiency, her mind already cataloging the tasks ahead. Today was designed to be the ultimate test, a comprehensive evaluation that would combine every skill they had demonstrated throughout the week into one final, definitive challenge. Master Chief Patterson had been deliberately vague about the specifics, saying only that it would test everything that makes a SEAL. The morning began with an unexpected twist. Instead of the usual formation and briefing, the candidates were led to a conference room where they found Admiral Rebecca Hayes, the highest-ranking female officer in Naval Special Warfare Command. Admiral Hayes had built her career breaking barriers and establishing precedents, and her presence signaled the importance of this moment. "Ladies," Admiral Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect in rooms full of skeptical military leaders. "Today's evaluation will differ for what you've experienced so far. You've proven your individual capabilities across multiple domains. Today, we're testing something more fundamental: your ability to function as a cohesive unit under conditions that simulate real-world special operations." The briefing revealed that the final day would consist of a single, extended mission lasting 12 hours. The scenario involved a hostage rescue operation in a hostile urban environment. The candidates would need to conduct reconnaissance, develop an operational plan, infiltrate enemy territory, neutralize threats, rescue hostages, and extract safely, all while being evaluated by teams of SEAL instructors who would play enemy forces, civilian populations, and allied units. What made this exercise particularly significant was that it would be conducted in front of the 301 Navy SEALs who had gathered from bases around the world. These men represented every SEAL team, every level of experience, and every perspective within the community. Their observations would inform critical decisions about the future of women in naval special warfare. Sarah studied the mission parameters carefully. The hostage scenario involved 3 American journalists captured by a terrorist cell in a simulated Middle Eastern city. Intelligence indicated the hostages were being held in a compound with multiple buildings, armed guards, and civilian populations nearby. The mission required precision, stealth, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. As the candidates prepared their equipment, Sarah noticed something that concerned her. Several of her teammates seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of the task ahead. The previous days had tested specific skills in controlled environments, but this mission required them to synthesize everything they had learned while managing multiple variables simultaneously. Rebecca Torres, whom Sarah had helped during the underwater navigation exercise, approached her nervously. "Martinez, I'm not sure I'm ready for this. The urban warfare simulations yesterday were tough, but this is beyond anything I've experienced." Sarah looked at Torres thoughtfully. In the Marine Corps, she had learned that leadership often meant knowing when to step forward and when to step back. This was clearly a moment that required her to take charge, not for personal glory, but for the success of the entire team. "Torres, you're more ready than you think," Sarah said quietly. "Remember your Army Ranger training. You've successfully completed operations like this before, just in different contexts. We're going to approach this systematically, play to everyone's strengths, and support each other where we need help." Sarah gathered the 12 women in a circle and began facilitating a planning session. She had observed that many military units failed complex missions not because they lacked individual skills, but because they couldn't integrate their capabilities effectively. Success required clear communication, defined roles, and shared understanding of objectives. Before we look at tactics, let's establish what each of us brings to this mission, Sarah began. Torres, your urban warfare experience from Army Rangers makes you our best choice for close-quarters combat. Chun, your pilot background, gives you superior situational awareness and navigation skills. Williams, your engineering experience means you understand building structures and potential weaknesses. As each woman identified her primary strength and secondary capabilities, a picture emerged of a team with complementary skills. Sarah realized they had everything needed to succeed. They just needed to coordinate effectively. The mission began with a 2-mile approach march carrying full combat loads. Sarah positioned herself in the middle of the formation, where she could communicate with the point person and rear guard while monitoring the team's overall condition. The route took them through varied terrain designed to test their navigation skills and physical endurance. 30 minutes into the march, they encountered their first challenge. SEAL instructors playing enemy scouts had established a checkpoint that blocked their planned route. Sarah called for a halt and quickly assessed the situation. A frontal approach would compromise their stealth mission before it began, but detouring would add significant time and might expose them to additional threats. Sarah studied the terrain and identified a solution. A drainage canal ran parallel to the checkpoint, offering concealed movement, but requiring the team to low crawl through mud and water for nearly half a mile. It was uncomfortable and slow, but it would maintain their tactical advantage. Everyone comfortable with getting dirty? Sarah asked with a slight smile. The response was unanimous. These women had already proven they weren't afraid of discomfort. The crawl through the drainage canal tested their mental resilience as much as their physical capabilities. The space was confined, the water was cold, and the mud made movement difficult. Several team members began to experience claustrophobia, but Sarah maintained calm communication throughout the ordeal, providing encouragement and ensuring no one was left behind. When they finally emerged from the canal, they were muddy, wet, and exhausted, but they had successfully bypassed the checkpoint undetected. More importantly, they had demonstrated their ability to endure hardship while maintaining unit cohesion. Several of the watching SEALs exchanged approving glances. They recognized the mental toughness required for such an undertaking. The next phase required detailed reconnaissance of the target compound. Sarah divided the team into 3 observation posts, each responsible for monitoring different aspects of the facility. She established herself at the primary observation point with the best view of the main building where intelligence suggested the hostages were being held. What Sarah observed through her binoculars was concerning. The SEAL instructors playing enemy forces had created a more complex scenario than anticipated. Guards were positioned at multiple levels. Patrol patterns overlapped in ways that eliminated obvious infiltration routes, and civilian actors moved through the area unpredictably. After 2 hours of observation, Sarah's team had identified 12 armed guards, 3 potential entry points, 2 possible escape routes, and at least 15 civilians in the immediate area. Any rescue attempt would require split-second timing and flawless execution. Sarah called her team leaders together for a planning conference. The challenge was developing an approach that would neutralize threats while protecting both hostages and civilians. Traditional SEAL tactics emphasize speed and overwhelming force, but this scenario required more finesse. "I think we're overthinking this," suggested Lieutenant Chun. "We have the element of surprise. A quick, aggressive assault could overwhelm the guards before they can react." Torres disagreed. "Too risky. If something goes wrong, we could lose the hostages. We need multiple contingency plans." Sarah listened to the discussion before offering her analysis. "Both approaches have merit, but we're missing something. Look at the guard rotation patterns. There's a 12-minute window when the eastern approach is minimally defended. If we create a diversion on the western side, we could draw additional guards away from our primary infiltration route. The plan that emerged was sophisticated and ambitious. Team 1 would create a diversion using simulated explosions and gunfire to draw guards toward the western perimeter. Team 2 would infiltrate from the east, neutralize remaining guards, and secure the hostages. Team 3 would establish overwatch positions to provide covering fire and monitor for reinforcements. Sarah would lead Team 2, the element that would actually conduct the rescue. This was the most dangerous assignment, but she had demonstrated the tactical skills and mental composure necessary for such responsibility. As they prepared to execute their plan, Sarah reflected on how much her perspective had evolved over the past 5 days. Initially, she had focused on proving herself individually, demonstrating that she could meet every physical and mental standard. But she had come to understand that SEAL missions succeeded or failed based on teamwork, trust, and shared commitment to mission success. The operation began with Team 1's diversionary attack. Torres led this element with impressive aggression, using smoke grenades and flashbang simulators to create chaos and confusion. The SEAL instructors playing enemy forces responded exactly as Sarah had predicted, shifting personnel toward the perceived threat. Sarah's infiltration team moved quickly through the eastern approach, using building shadows and natural cover to avoid detection. They reached the primary building without encountering opposition, but Sarah knew the most challenging phase was just beginning. The building's interior presented a maze of rooms, corridors, and potential hiding places. Intelligence indicated the hostages were on the second floor, but the exact location remained unknown. Sarah would have to search systematically while remaining alert for armed guards and booby traps. Sarah led the way through the ground floor, using hand signals to coordinate with her teammates. They moved with practiced silence, checking every corner and doorway for threats. The tension was extraordinary. They knew that SEAL instructors were positioned throughout the building, waiting to engage them with simulation rounds that would determine success or failure. Halfway up the stairs to the second floor, Sarah detected movement ahead. She held up her fist, signaling her team to freeze and listen carefully. Footsteps indicated at least 2 guards in the corridor above. Sarah had to neutralize them quickly and quietly to avoid alerting other enemy forces. She signaled for Williams to take the left side of the corridor while she approached from the right. On her count, they would engage simultaneously, using non-lethal takedown techniques that would incapacitate the guards without creating noise. The coordinated assault worked perfectly. Both guards were down within seconds, never having a chance to raise an alarm. Sarah's team continued their advance, systematically clearing rooms until they located the simulated hostages in a corner room. The 3 civilian actors playing American journalists looked appropriately disheveled and frightened. Sarah's team needed to move them quickly while ensuring their safety and maintaining tactical awareness. This was perhaps the most challenging aspect of hostage rescue operations, protecting vulnerable people while remaining prepared for combat. As they began moving toward the extraction point, Sarah heard Torres's voice through her radio communicating urgent information. Martinez, be advised, reinforcements approaching from the north. Estimate 12 personnel with heavy weapons. You need to expedite. Sarah's mind raced through tactical options. Their planned extraction route would expose them to the approaching reinforcements. She needed an alternative that would protect the hostages while allowing her team to reach the extraction point. Studying the building layout, Sarah identified a possible solution. A service corridor connected to an adjacent building that would provide concealed movement toward their alternate extraction point. The route was longer and more complex, but it would avoid direct confrontation with overwhelming enemy forces. Change of plans, Sarah announced to her team. We're going through the service corridor to Building 2, then exiting through the south entrance. Chun, contact Team 3 and tell them to shift Overwatch to cover our new route. The movement through the service corridor tested every skill they had developed over the previous days. The space was narrow, poorly lit, and filled with obstacles. The simulated hostages were struggling with the physical demands of rapid movement, requiring constant encouragement and assistance. Halfway through the corridor, they encountered another challenge. A locked door blocked their path, and Sarah could hear enemy forces moving through the building behind them. She needed to breach the door quickly without alerting nearby guards. William stepped forward with a small explosive charge designed for door breaching. "I can blow it, but there will be noise," she whispered. Sarah considered the options. The explosive would definitely create noise, but trying to find an alternative route might expose them to the pursuing guards. Sometimes leadership meant making difficult decisions under pressure. "Do it," Sarah decided. Everyone prepare for immediate movement after the breach. The explosion echoed through the building, and Sarah knew they had lost the element of surprise. Now speed was more important than stealth. They rushed through the breached doorway and began moving rapidly toward the extraction point. Enemy forces began converging on their position from multiple directions. Sarah could hear commands being shouted and equipment being moved as the SEAL instructors playing opposing forces coordinated their response. The next few minutes would determine whether the mission succeeded or failed. Team 3's Overwatch element began engaging the pursuing guards with covering fire, buying precious time for Sarah's team to reach safety. The sound of simulated gunfire filled the air as the exercise reached its climax. With 50 meters remaining to the extraction point, Sarah's team encountered their final obstacle. 3 guards had positioned themselves to block the exit route, and there was no way to bypass them. Sarah would have to make a frontal assault against prepared positions, exactly the scenario military commanders tried to avoid. Sarah quickly assessed the tactical situation and made a decision that would be discussed in SEAL training rooms for years to come. Instead of attempting a conventional assault, she decided to use the hostage's presence as a tactical advantage. "Trust me on this," she told her team and the civilian actors. "When I give the signal, everyone starts shouting and moving toward the guards. Create maximum confusion and noise." The plan was unconventional and risky, but Sarah understood that sometimes success required thinking beyond standard procedures. When she gave the signal, her entire group began shouting, moving erratically, and creating chaos that overwhelmed the guards' ability to distinguish between hostages, rescuers, and threats. In the confusion, Sarah and her team were able to close distance and neutralize the guards using non-lethal techniques. Within seconds, they had secured the extraction point and successfully completed the mission. The exercise concluded with all hostages rescued, all team members accounted for, and objectives achieved within the specified time parameters. As the simulation ended and everyone switched from tactical mode to debrief mode, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not just for her individual performance, but for what they had achieved as a team. Master Chief Patterson approached Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Martinez, that was some innovative thinking with the final assault. Not exactly by the book, but highly effective." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Master Chief, sometimes the situation demands adaptation. The book provides a foundation, but real-world operations require flexibility." Patterson smiled slightly, the first time Sarah had seen him show any emotion throughout the entire evaluation. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need in special operations." "Well done." As the 301 Navy SEALs began dispersing to discuss what they had witnessed, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. She had proven that she belonged in this community not by meeting male standards, but by demonstrating the unique value she could bring to SEAL operations. The evaluation was complete, but Sarah sensed that her real challenges were just beginning. The events of the next few hours would determine not only her future, but the future of women in naval special warfare. The evening following the hostage rescue simulation brought an unexpected development. Instead of the usual debriefing and preparation for departure, the female candidates were informed that Admiral Hayes wanted to meet with them privately. The tone of the message suggested something significant was about to happen. Sarah and her 11 teammates gathered in the same conference room where they had received their final mission briefing that morning. The atmosphere was different now. There was tension in the air that hadn't been present before. Admiral Hayes entered with Master Chief Patterson and 2 other senior officers whom Sarah didn't recognize. "Ladies," Admiral Hayes began, her expression serious. "Your performance over the past 5 days has been remarkable. You've exceeded expectations in every measurable category and demonstrated the kind of teamwork and adaptability that defines Special Operations Forces." Sarah felt a surge of pride, but Admiral Hayes's tone suggested that praise wasn't the purpose of this meeting. "However," the Admiral continued, "we've encountered an unexpected situation. A group of senior SEAL officers has requested permission to conduct what they're calling a final validation exercise. They believe that the evaluations you've completed, while comprehensive, don't adequately test your ability to function under the kind of extreme stress that SEALs face in actual combat." Master Chief Patterson stepped forward. "To be clear, this request is unusual and not part of the official evaluation protocol. The officers making this request represent a significant faction within the SEAL community, men with extensive combat experience who remain skeptical about women joining their ranks." Sarah felt her teammates shifting uncomfortably around her. She understood the implications immediately. Despite proving themselves over 5 grueling days, they were being asked to undergo additional testing because some SEALs remained unconvinced. Admiral Hayes continued, "The exercise they've proposed is voluntary. You can decline without any impact on your evaluation results. However, if you choose to participate, the outcome will influence future decisions about women in SEAL training." Torres spoke up first. "Admiral, what exactly are they proposing?" "A modified version of what SEALs call surf torture," Master Chief Patterson replied. "Extended exposure to cold ocean conditions while performing various physical and mental tasks. It's designed to break down mental barriers and test absolute resilience." Sarah had read about surf torture during her preparation for this evaluation. It was one of the most notorious aspects of SEAL training. Candidates were required to lie in cold ocean surf for hours while instructors applied psychological pressure designed to force them to quit. The exercise had a legendary reputation for revealing who truly had the mental toughness to become a SEAL. "How long would this exercise last?" asked Chun. "That would depend on the participants," Admiral Hayes answered. "It continues until candidates either demonstrate the required mental resilience or choose to withdraw." Sarah studied the faces of her teammates. Some appeared determined, others looked concerned, and a few seemed angry at being asked to prove themselves yet again. She understood all of these reactions. They had already endured 5 days of intense testing and demonstrated their capabilities conclusively. But Sarah also understood something else. The skeptical SEALs weren't necessarily wrong to have concerns. The SEAL community had spent decades building bonds of trust and mutual reliance that were literally matters of life and death. Any change to that dynamic needed to be thoroughly tested. "Admiral," Sarah said, "can you tell us who specifically is requesting this additional evaluation?" Admiral Hayes hesitated before responding. "The request comes from a group of 23 SEAL team leaders, all with multiple combat deployments. They're not opposed to women joining the community. They want to be certain that anyone who earns a SEAL Trident can be trusted with their lives." Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper issue. This wasn't about gender discrimination. It was about the fundamental question of whether women could handle the most extreme challenges that SEALs faced. The only way to resolve that question definitively was through the kind of testing that pushed people beyond their perceived limits. "I'll do it," Sarah announced quietly. Torres looked at her with surprise. "Martinez, we don't have to prove anything else. We've already completed every test they've given us." "We've proven we can meet their standards," Sarah replied. "Now we have the chance to prove we can exceed them." One by one, the other candidates agreed to participate in the additional evaluation. Despite their fatigue and frustration, they understood the larger significance of this moment. They weren't just representing themselves. They were representing every woman who might follow in their footsteps. The exercise was scheduled for the following morning, giving the candidates one night to rest and prepare mentally. Sarah spent the evening reviewing everything she had learned about mental resilience and stress management. She knew that surf torture was primarily a psychological challenge. The physical discomfort was intense, but the real test was maintaining mental clarity and determination when every instinct demanded surrender. The next morning brought overcast skies and choppy ocean conditions that would make the challenge even more difficult. As Sarah and her teammates prepared their equipment, she noticed that far more than 23 SEALs had gathered to observe. Word had spread throughout the naval base, and nearly all 301 SEALs who had come for the original evaluation were now present. Master Chief Patterson provided a final briefing. The exercise will take place in the surf zone, where water temperature is approximately 58 degrees. You'll be required to perform various physical and mental tasks while maintaining position in the water. The exercise continues until you demonstrate the required resilience or choose to withdraw. He paused, looking at each candidate directly. There's no shame in withdrawing. This exercise is voluntary, and we already have comprehensive data on your capabilities. Sarah understood that Patterson was offering them a final opportunity to avoid what everyone knew would be an extremely challenging experience. She appreciated his consideration, but her decision was already made. The candidates entered the ocean wearing only standard physical training uniforms, shorts, and t-shirts that provided minimal insulation against the cold water. The initial shock of the temperature was overwhelming, causing involuntary gasps and muscle contractions as their bodies attempted to generate warmth. Sarah forced herself to focus on controlled breathing techniques she had learned during meditation practice. The key to surviving in cold water was managing the body's panic response and maintaining mental clarity despite physical discomfort. She positioned herself in the surf zone and began the mental preparation that would be necessary for the hours ahead. The first task was simply maintaining position while waves crashed over them repeatedly. The combination of cold water and wave action created disorientation that made it difficult to maintain balance and spatial awareness. Sarah focused on keeping her feet planted firmly on the ocean floor while allowing her upper body to move with the waves rather than fighting them. After 30 minutes, the instructors began adding psychological pressure. They walked along the shoreline shouting comments designed to break down mental resistance. Some questioned the candidates' motivation, others suggested they were too weak to continue, and a few offered warm blankets and hot coffee to anyone who chose to quit. Sarah had expected this psychological warfare and had prepared mental defenses. She reminded herself of her mother's sacrifices, the Marines who had died protecting their country, and the women who would benefit if she succeeded. These thoughts provided strength that no amount of physical discomfort could overcome. As the first hour passed, Sarah noticed that several of her teammates were beginning to struggle. The combination of cold water, wave action, and psychological pressure was taking its toll. Torres was shivering uncontrollably, and two other candidates appeared to be experiencing early stages of hypothermia. The instructors introduced a new challenge, solving mathematical problems while maintaining position in the surf. They would shout equations, and candidates had to provide correct answers within 10 seconds. Wrong answers resulted in additional time in the water. Sarah found that focusing on the mental tasks actually helped her manage the physical discomfort. By concentrating on mathematical calculations, she could partially ignore the cold and maintain mental sharpness. She answered every problem correctly while helping teammates who were struggling with the mental challenges. After 2 hours, 3 candidates had chosen to withdraw. They were immediately wrapped in blankets and taken to medical personnel for evaluation. Sarah felt no judgment toward these women. They had already proven their capabilities over the previous 5 days, and Choosing to protect their health was a reasonable decision. The remaining candidates faced increasingly difficult challenges. They were required to memorize complex sequences of numbers and letters while remaining in the surf, perform underwater breath-holding exercises while maintaining position against wave action, and answer detailed questions about SEAL history and operations. Sarah's Marine Corps training proved valuable during this phase. She had spent years developing the ability to compartmentalize discomfort and maintain performance under stress. While her body struggled with the cold water, her mind remained clear and focused. Around the 3-hour mark, something unexpected happened. Sarah noticed that one of her teammates, Lisa Williams, the engineer from Colorado, was beginning to lose consciousness. The combination of cold water and exhaustion was causing her to slip beneath the surface repeatedly. Without hesitation, Sarah moved to Williams's position and began providing physical support. She wrapped her arm around Williams's waist and helped her maintain position in the surf while continuing to participate in the exercise herself. This action drew immediate attention from the watching SEALs. According to the strict rules of surf torture, candidates were expected to focus solely on their individual performance. Helping a teammate could be seen as compromising one's own chances of success. But Sarah had made a decision based on SEAL values rather than SEAL rules. The community prized loyalty to teammates above individual achievement, and she wasn't going to watch a fellow Marine struggle without providing assistance. "Martinez," Master Chief Patterson called out. "You're responsible for your own performance. Step away from Williams." Sarah looked directly at Patterson, her voice carrying despite the crashing waves. "Master Chief, no one gets left behind. That's not just a Marine motto, it's a SEAL principle." The statement created a moment of profound silence among the watching SEALs. Sarah had challenged the exercise protocol, but she had done so by invoking one of their most sacred values. The tension was extraordinary as Patterson considered how to respond. Finally, he nodded slightly. "Continue the exercise, both of you." For the next hour, Sarah maintained her own performance while supporting Williams. She answered every question correctly, completed every physical challenge, and demonstrated the kind of mental resilience that defined elite warriors, all while ensuring her teammates' safety. The watching SEALs began to murmur among themselves. Many recognized that Sarah was displaying exactly the kind of character they valued most highly in their community. She was willing to sacrifice personal success for a teammate's welfare, demonstrating loyalty that went beyond individual achievement. As the 4th hour approached, only 5 candidates remained in the water. The cold had become almost unbearable, and the psychological pressure had intensified significantly. The instructors were now offering increasingly tempting reasons to quit: warm food, medical attention, and the assurance that they had already proven themselves sufficiently. Sarah felt her physical reserves approaching depletion, but her mental determination remained unshakable. She had come too far and endured too much to quit now. More importantly, she understood that this moment would define not just her future, but the future of women in special operations. The exercise reached its climax when the instructors announced the final challenge. The remaining candidates would be required to recite the SEAL Creed from memory while performing underwater breath-holding exercises. Any mistake would result in additional time in the water, and the exercise would continue until everyone either succeeded or withdrew. Sarah had memorized the SEAL Creed during her preparation, understanding its significance to the community she hoped to join. As she began reciting the words while fighting against cold water and exhaustion, she felt a profound connection to the values that define naval special warfare. "In times of war or uncertainty, there is a special breed of warrior ready to answer our nation's call," she began, her voice carrying clearly despite the challenging conditions. The watching SEALs began to join in the recitation, their voices combining with Sarah's across the beach. A common man with uncommon desire to succeed. Forged by adversity, he stands alongside America's finest special operations forces. As the creed continued, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. The 301 Navy SEALs gathered on the beach were no longer watching skeptically. They were participating in a moment that would define the future of their community. When the final words were spoken, "I will not fail," a profound silence settled over the beach. Sarah and her 4 remaining teammates had endured over 4 hours in conditions that would have broken most people, demonstrating mental resilience that met any standard the SEAL community could establish. Master Chief Patterson walked into the surf zone and spoke quietly to Sarah. "Martinez, that's enough. You've proven everything that needed proving." As Sarah and her teammates were helped from the water and wrapped in warming blankets, she saw something in the eyes of the watching SEALs that hadn't been there before. It was respect, not grudging acknowledgement, but genuine recognition of proven capability. But Sarah's greatest challenge was yet to come. In the next few hours, she would face a situation that would test every skill she had developed and every principle she believed in. The 301 Navy SEALs who had witnessed her performance were about to see something that would redefine their understanding of strength, courage, and what it truly meant to be an elite warrior. The medical evaluation following the surf torture exercise revealed the toll that 4 hours in cold water had taken on the candidates. 3 required immediate treatment for mild hypothermia, while others showed signs of exhaustion and dehydration. Sarah, despite supporting Williams throughout much of the exercise, was among those in the best physical condition, a testament to her conditioning and mental preparation. As the female candidates recovered, Admiral Hayes convened a meeting with the senior SEAL officers who had requested the additional evaluation. The discussion was private, but Sarah could see through the conference room windows that the conversation was intense. Gestures were animated, voices were raised, and the body language suggested significant disagreement about something. Master Chief Patterson emerged from the meeting and approached Sarah, who was warming up with hot coffee and dry clothes. His expression was serious, but she detected something that might have been concern. "Martinez, the Admiral wants to speak with you privately. There's been a development." Sarah followed Patterson to a smaller office where Admiral Hayes was waiting with 2 men she hadn't seen before. One wore civilian clothes, but carried himself with obvious military bearing, while the other was in Navy dress uniform with insignia indicating flag rank. "Sarah," Admiral Hayes began, using her first name for the first time, "I'd like you to meet Deputy Director James Crawford from the Defense Intelligence Agency and Admiral Thomas Mitchell from Naval Special Warfare Command." Sarah stood at attention, sensing that whatever was happening extended far beyond her evaluation program. Director Crawford spoke first. "Ms. Martinez, your performance over the past week has been exceptional. More importantly, your leadership qualities and tactical thinking have impressed people at very high levels of government." Admiral Mitchell continued, "We're facing a developing situation that requires immediate attention. 3 hours ago, a group calling itself the Armed Patriots Coalition seized control of a federal building in downtown San Diego. They're holding 17 federal employees hostage, including 2 naval intelligence officers with access to classified information." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was no longer about evaluation or training. This was a real-world crisis that demanded immediate response. "The situation is complicated by several factors," Director Crawford explained. "The terrorists have military training, at least for our former special operations personnel who were discharged for various infractions. They've fortified the building extensively and have demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of federal security procedures." Admiral Hayes leaned forward. "Local law enforcement and FBI tactical teams have the building surrounded, but they've been unable to establish any meaningful contact with the hostage-takers. Every negotiation attempt has been rebuffed, and intelligence suggests they're planning to execute hostages if their demands aren't met." Sarah processed this information while wondering why she was being briefed on an active terrorist incident. The answer came from Admiral Mitchell. The terrorist leader has specifically demanded to speak with the woman who thinks she can be a SEAL. He's been monitoring news reports about your evaluation and has demanded that you serve as a negotiator. If you refuse, he's threatened to begin killing hostages immediately. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Somehow, her journey to prove herself worthy of SEAL training had attracted the attention of a domestic terrorist who was now using her as leverage in a hostage situation. "Sir, I'm not a trained negotiator," Sarah said carefully. "I don't understand why he would want to speak with me specifically." Director Crawford pulled out a tablet and showed her a video that had been recorded inside the occupied federal building. The terrorist leader, a bearded man in military-style clothing, was speaking directly to the camera. "My name is Marcus Whelan, former Navy SEAL, honorably discharged after 12 years of service to a country that no longer values the warriors who protect it," the man began. "I've been watching the news about women trying to join our ranks, and I want to speak directly to Sarah Martinez." The video continued with Whelan explaining his grievances against what he called the feminization of America's military. His demands included reversing policies that allowed women in combat roles, eliminating diversity programs in special operations, and recognizing what he claimed was the natural superiority of male warriors. "Martinez has 1 hour to present herself as a negotiator, or we begin executing federal employees," Whelan concluded. "She wants to prove she belongs with SEALs? Let's see how she handles a real-world crisis." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions: anger at being manipulated, concern for the innocent hostages, and determination to resolve the situation. She also recognized something that the senior officers might not have considered. "Admiral, this man is trying to use me as a symbol in some kind of ideological statement. If I agree to negotiate, I'm validating his narrative that women in the military is somehow a political issue rather than a matter of capability." Admiral Mitchell nodded. "We understand the complexity of the situation. However, 17 innocent lives are at stake. We're asking for your help not because we agree with his demands, but because you might be the only person who can prevent a massacre." Director Crawford added crucial information. "Our behavioral analysts believe that Whelan is experiencing some form of psychological break. His military record shows exemplary service, but he's been struggling with PTSD and has become involved with extremist groups since his discharge. He may see this confrontation as a way to validate his worldview." Sarah considered the tactical situation. A former SEAL with military training, fortified positions, and nothing to lose represented an extremely dangerous adversary. Traditional assault techniques would likely result in hostage casualties, and negotiation required establishing trust that seemed impossible given Whelan's stated motivations. But Sarah also recognized an opportunity. If she could engage Whelan as one warrior to another, acknowledging his service while challenging his conclusions, she might be able to create an opening for resolution. "I'll do it," Sarah decided, "but I want to establish some ground rules. I'll negotiate, but I won't validate his ideology or compromise the principles that got me here." Admiral Hayes looked relieved. "What do you need from us?" Sarah's mind was already working through tactical considerations. "I need complete intelligence on the building layout, the hostage locations, and Whelan's background. I also need to understand what resources are available if negotiation fails." Director Crawford briefed her on the current situation. The terrorists controlled a 6-story federal building housing offices for various agencies. Hostages were being held on the 3rd floor, while the terrorists had established defensive positions throughout the building. Whelan had explosives and had threatened to detonate them if any assault was attempted. He's given us one communication method: a cell phone number that connects directly to him. All conversations will be recorded, and we'll have psychologists monitoring for opportunities to de-escalate. Sarah reviewed the building plans and began developing an approach. She understood that successful negotiation required establishing personal connection while gradually introducing alternative perspectives. Whelan wanted to prove that women couldn't handle real combat stress, She needed to demonstrate exactly the opposite. The call was scheduled for exactly 1 hour after his ultimatum. Sarah positioned herself in the FBI command post that had been established across the street from the occupied building. Through the windows, she could see armed figures moving behind barricaded windows. When the phone rang, Sarah answered immediately. "Marcus, this is Sarah Martinez." "So, you actually came." Waylon's voice carried a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. "I wasn't sure you'd have the courage." "I'm here because innocent people are in danger," Sarah replied calmly. "I understand you have grievances, and I'm willing to listen. But first I need to know that the hostages are safe." "They're fine for now, but that depends on whether you're really ready for an honest conversation about what's happening to our military." Sarah had prepared for this moment by studying Waylon's background. He had served with distinction in Iraq and Afghanistan, earning multiple decorations before being medically retired due to injuries sustained in combat. His subsequent struggles with civilian life were unfortunately common among veterans. "Marcus, I've read about your service record. 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, 12 years defending our country. You're exactly the kind of warrior that America needs and respects. Then, why is the military trying to replace people like me with diversity quotas and political correctness?" Waylon's voice carried genuine pain beneath the anger. Sarah recognized the opening she needed. They're not trying to replace anyone. The military is trying to find the best people possible, regardless of where they come from. You and I both know that capability matters more than demographics. You think you have the same capabilities as a male SEAL? You think you can handle the same stress, the same physical demands, the same mental pressure? Sarah heard the challenge in his voice and realized that Waylon was seeking validation for his belief system. He wanted her to admit inadequacy, confirming his view that women couldn't meet elite warrior standards. "Marcus, over the past week, I've completed every test the Navy gave me. I've proven I can meet their standards. But more importantly, I've proven that diversity of thought and experience makes teams stronger, not weaker." "Standards?" Waylon laughed bitterly. "They lower the standards for you. They changed the requirements so women could pass." Sarah felt anger rising, but forced herself to remain calm. "No one lowered any standards. I completed the same exercises as male candidates, under the same conditions, evaluated by the same instructors. If you don't believe that, then you don't trust the SEAL community you claim to represent." The conversation continued for 40 minutes as Sarah gradually established rapport while challenging Waylon's assumptions. She shared stories of her Marine Corps service, her deployments, and the men who had mentored her throughout her career. Slowly, she began to hear uncertainty in his responses. "Marcus, I understand feeling like the world is changing in ways that don't make sense. But change doesn't have to mean abandonment of values. The SEAL community will always value courage, sacrifice, and loyalty. Those principles don't depend on gender." "You don't understand what it's like," Waylon said, his voice becoming more emotional. "I gave everything to this country. I lost friends, I got wounded, I sacrificed my body and my mind. And now they're saying that what we did, who we are, doesn't matter anymore." Sarah recognized that beneath Waylon's ideological anger was grief for a sense of purpose and identity that he felt was being taken away. This was the moment when skilled negotiation could make the difference between resolution and tragedy. "Marcus, your service will always matter. The sacrifices you and your teammates made will never be forgotten or diminished. Adding women to special operations doesn't take anything away from what you accomplished. It honors it by ensuring that those values continue into the future." The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. When Waylon spoke again, his voice was quieter, less certain. "They said you did 4 hours in surf torture yesterday. Is that true?" "It's true. And I did it alongside other women who proved they belonged there." "For hours?" Waylon seemed to be processing this information. "That's longer than most SEAL candidates manage." Sarah sensed a crucial moment. "Marcus, strength isn't about excluding others. It's about setting standards so high that only the best can meet them, regardless of background. You know that. Your SEAL training taught you that. She could hear voices in the background and realized that other terrorists were pressuring Wayland to end the conversation. Time was running out, and she still hadn't secured the hostage's release. Marcus, you've made your point. People are listening to your concerns. But these federal employees didn't create the policies you disagree with. They're just trying to do their jobs and support their families. Let them go, and let's continue this conversation. If I release the hostages, they'll storm the building and kill us all, Wayland replied. No, they won't. I give you my word as a Marine and as someone who respects your service. If you release the hostages, you'll have a chance to tell your story to the country. Sarah was making promises she wasn't authorized to make, but she sensed that Wayland was wavering. The next few seconds would determine whether the situation ended peacefully or tragically. Then she heard something that changed everything, shouting inside the building, followed by what sounded like gunfire. The phone line went dead, and Sarah realized that whatever control Wayland might have had over the situation had just collapsed. Through the command post windows, she could see armed figures moving frantically behind the barricaded windows. Something had gone wrong inside the building, and the hostages were now in immediate danger. In the next few minutes, Sarah would face a situation that would test every skill she had developed and every principle she believed in. The 301 Navy SEALs who had witnessed her training were about to see her in actual combat, a test that would prove definitively whether she belonged among America's elite warriors. The gunshots from inside the federal building shattered the tense calm of the negotiation. Sarah watched through the command post windows as muzzle flashes lit up the third floor where the hostages were being held. The careful dialogue she had built with Marcus Wayland over the past hour was meaningless now. Innocent lives were in immediate danger. FBI Tactical Commander Jack Morrison was already coordinating with his team leaders when Sarah approached him. "Commander, I need to know what's happening in there." Morrison looked at her grimly while listening to radio communications from surveillance teams positioned around the building. Internal conflict. Wayland was apparently trying to convince his people to release the hostages when one of his men, a former Army Ranger named Dylan Curtis, decided to take control. Curtis just shot Wayland and is now threatening to execute hostages unless we withdraw all law enforcement within 10 minutes. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Curtis had been described in the intelligence briefings as the most unstable member of the terrorist group, with a history of violence and extremist ideology that went far beyond Wayland's grievances about military policy. Curtis has no interest in negotiation, Director Crawford added, joining the conversation. Our psychological profile indicates he's seeking martyrdom and maximum casualties. He considers this a holy war against what he calls the corrupt federal government. Admiral Mitchell was studying building schematics with several SEAL team leaders who had been brought in as advisors. "Commander Morrison, what are your assault options?" Morrison shook his head. "Limited. Curtis moved all hostages to a single room and has explosives wired throughout the floor. Our thermal imaging shows him wearing what appears to be a suicide vest. Any frontal assault would likely result in massive casualties." Sarah studied the building plans, applying the tactical analysis skills she had developed during her Marine Corps service and SEAL evaluation. The situation appeared impossible. Curtis controlled all access points, had clear fields of fire, and possessed the means to kill everyone in the building if threatened. But Sarah noticed something that the others might have missed. The building's original construction from the 1960s included a maintenance shaft system that connected all floors. Modern security renovations had sealed most of these passages, but architectural drawings showed that one shaft still provided access from the basement to the third floor. "Commander, has anyone considered the maintenance shaft on the building's north side?" Sarah asked, pointing to the relevant section of the blueprints. Morrison examined the area she indicated. "Too narrow for our tactical teams, and the access point is directly visible from Curtis's position. Anyone attempting entry would be exposed before they could reach the hostage room." Sarah measured the shaft dimensions with her fingers. At 18 inches wide, it would indeed be too narrow for most tactical officers wearing standard gear. But it would accommodate someone of her size, carrying minimal equipment. "I could fit," she said quietly. The conversation stopped as everyone processed what Sarah had suggested. Admiral Mitchell spoke first. "Martinez, you're not trained for hostage rescue operations. This isn't a training exercise. Sir, with respect, I have extensive close-quarters combat experience from my Marine deployments. More importantly, Curtis doesn't know I'm here. He's expecting tactical teams, not a single operator approaching from an unexpected direction." Director Crawford was already shaking his head. "Too dangerous. You'd be going in alone, without backup, against multiple armed terrorists. If something goes wrong, we'd lose you and still have the same hostage situation." Sarah understood their concerns, but she also understood something they might not have considered fully. Curtis wants a confrontation with federal forces. He's planning to die, but he wants to take as many people with him as possible. A standard assault gives him exactly what he wants: maximum violence and casualties. She paused, organizing her thoughts before presenting what she believed was the only viable option. But a single operator changing the tactical dynamic might create opportunities that don't exist with a frontal assault. "If I can reach the third floor undetected, I might be able to neutralize Curtis before he can detonate the explosives." Master Chief Patterson, who had been listening to the discussion, stepped forward. "Martinez has a point. Curtis is expecting overwhelming force. A single operator might be able to achieve surprise." The debate continued for several minutes as commanders weighed the risks of various options. Meanwhile, radio communications indicated that Curtis was becoming increasingly agitated and had begun making specific threats about execution timelines. Finally, FBI Commander Morrison made the decision. "Martinez, if you're willing to attempt this approach, we'll provide support. But understand that once you're inside that building, we may not be able to extract you if things go wrong." Sarah nodded, accepting the reality of what she was volunteering to do. "I understand, Commander, but those hostages don't have any other options." The next 20 minutes were spent in rapid preparation. Sarah was equipped with lightweight tactical gear, a suppressed pistol, flashbang grenades, and a communication system that would allow her to coordinate with the tactical teams outside. Most importantly, she was given detailed intelligence about the building's interior layout and Curtis's current position. The 301 Navy SEALs who had gathered to observe her evaluation were now witnessing something unprecedented. A woman who had been trying to prove herself worthy of their community was about to attempt one of the most dangerous hostage rescue operations any of them had ever seen. Several SEAL team leaders approached her as she prepared for the mission. "Martinez," said Senior Chief Petty Officer David Kane, a veteran of multiple combat deployments, "remember that speed and surprise are your greatest advantages. Don't try to be a hero. Just create opportunities for the tactical teams to finish the job." Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, one of the few female SEALs to have completed the training program before the official policy change, offered more personal advice. "Trust your instincts and remember your training. You've already proven you belong here. Now prove it to yourself." The approach to the maintenance shaft required Sarah to move through the building's underground parking garage while remaining invisible to Curtis's surveillance. FBI teams had disabled most of the security cameras, but thermal imaging indicated that one of Curtis's associates was monitoring the basement level. Sarah moved through the darkness using techniques she had learned during her Marine Corps training in urban warfare. Every step was calculated to minimize noise, every movement planned to use available cover. When she encountered the terrorist guard position near the maintenance shaft access, she neutralized him using hand-to-hand combat techniques that rendered him unconscious without creating noise that might alert Curtis. The maintenance shaft proved even more challenging than expected. The 18-inch diameter required Sarah to crawl on her belly, pushing her equipment ahead of her while navigating turns and obstacles in complete darkness. The physical demands were extraordinary, but She had prepared for this kind of stress during her SEAL evaluation. After 40 minutes of crawling, Sarah reached the third-floor access point. She could hear voices from the hostage room 20 feet away, including Curtis's increasingly agitated commands to his remaining associates. Through the thin wall separating her from the room, she could hear terrified federal employees pleading for their lives. Sarah carefully removed the maintenance shaft grating and studied the tactical situation through a small gap in the wall. Curtis was positioned near the room's entrance with clear sight lines to all hostages, while two other terrorists controlled windows overlooking the street. The explosives were wired to a dead man switch that Curtis held in his left hand. The tactical challenge was overwhelming. Curtis was alert, well-positioned, and holding 17 innocent lives hostage with explosives that would kill everyone if triggered. Any direct assault would likely result in massive casualties. But Sarah noticed something that created a possible opportunity. Curtis was wearing a suicide vest, but the detonation device was separate from the dead man switch controlling the room explosives. If she could neutralize him quickly enough, the suicide vest might detonate without triggering the larger explosives that threatened the hostages. Sarah positioned herself for what she knew would be the most critical moment of her life. She had one chance to save 17 innocent lives, and failure would result in a massacre that would haunt everyone involved forever. Using hand signals, she coordinated with the tactical teams positioned outside the building. On her signal, they would create a diversion that might give her the split-second advantage she needed. When the diversion began, flashbang grenades detonated outside the building's windows. Sarah moved with speed and precision that amazed even her. She burst through the wall opening and engaged Curtis before he could react to the unexpected threat. The confrontation lasted less than 10 seconds, but seemed to unfold in slow motion. Sarah's first shot wounded Curtis and caused him to release the dead man's switch, but didn't prevent him from triggering his suicide vest. The explosion threw Sarah backward and filled the room with smoke and debris. When the smoke cleared, Sarah was unconscious against the far wall, Curtis was dead, and the hostages were free. The larger explosives had not detonated because Sarah's precise shooting had separated Curtis from the detonation device before he could trigger it. FBI tactical teams stormed the building and secured the remaining terrorists within minutes. Medical personnel rushed to treat Sarah, who had sustained serious injuries from the explosion but was expected to make a full recovery. As news of the successful hostage rescue spread, the 301 Navy SEALs who had witnessed Sarah's journey from evaluation candidate to combat hero understood that they had observed something unprecedented. A woman who had spent a week proving she could meet their standards had demonstrated that she could exceed them under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Master Chief Patterson visited Sarah in the hospital the following day. "Martinez, I've been a SEAL for 23 years, and I've never seen anyone show more courage or tactical brilliance than you demonstrated yesterday." Sarah, despite her injuries, managed a slight smile. "Master Chief, I was just doing what any SEAL would do, protecting innocent lives and completing the mission." Patterson nodded with obvious respect. "That's exactly right, and that's exactly why you belong in our community." The events of that week, from Sarah's exceptional performance during the evaluation to her heroic actions during the hostage crisis, became a defining moment in military history. The 301 Navy SEALs who had gathered to assess women's capabilities in special operations returned to their units with a clear understanding that capability, courage, and commitment were not determined by gender. Sarah's story inspired a generation of women to pursue careers in special operations and proved that America's military was strongest when it drew from the full spectrum of talent available in the population. She had faced skepticism, overcome extraordinary challenges, and demonstrated that the values that defined elite warriors, courage, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to mission success, transcended traditional barriers. Years later, when military historians studied the integration of women into special operations forces, they would identify Sarah Martinez's week of evaluation and her heroic rescue of 17 hostages as the moment when perception became reality and barriers became opportunities. She had proven that she didn't need anyone to lower standards or make exceptions. She was capable of meeting and exceeding the highest standards that America's military could establish. The title of her story, "They Picked the Wrong Woman," would become a rallying cry for excellence that inspired warriors of all backgrounds to push beyond perceived limitations and prove that true strength came not from excluding others, but from setting standards so high that only the very best could reach them, regardless of where they started their journey.